A couple of weeks ago, we put out a video that was absolutely horrifying to some people. Now, we'll link to the video below. It was a YouTube short. It also showed up on Instagram and on Twitter. But this video discussed the fact that not only is strength just as important to grandparents as it is to their grandkids, but that it's actually more important to grandparents. And you're looking at some of the original footage from this video right now. This video talked about the fact that strength is, as we get older, strength is independence, strength is capability, strength is freedom. But as I mentioned earlier, for a lot of people, this video was terrifying, specifically the squats. Now, most of the comments that we received were very congratulatory. They were just thrilled that our parents, that our grandparents were training, that they were getting stronger. But every time we post a video with older folks in it training, getting stronger, every time there's always some criticism that shows up in the comments, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and they're always concerned. This is always coming from either the uninformed or the internet experts, which, by the way, are the same thing. But they're always concerned about one thing. Specifically, they are concerned that they're watching people squat leaned over, that people are pointing their chest at the floor while they're squatting. We hear comments ranging from, they're leaned over too much, why are they so horizontal, keep the chest up, that's terrible coaching, you're gonna get grandma hurt. A lot of the comments are, of course, well-meaning, but some others not so much, as you can imagine. Again, the thing that they're horrified by is this leaned over squat. Interestingly enough, they're not horrified by the leaned over deadlift, even though a deadlift is even more leaned over than the squat, but that's a topic for another day. So the question is, this leaned over, this relatively horizontal back angle in the squat that we're looking for, is it horrifying? In short, no. The human body is very capable of leaning over. It's been doing so for, let's just say, thousands of years. It's a function of your hips. We are capable of leaning over. It's a very useful thing to do. We do it when we pick things up off of the floor. And quite frankly, if you can lean over with no weight, then the next day you can probably do it with 5 pounds, and the next day you can do it with 10 pounds, and so forth and so on, right? So the people in these videos, they didn't start with these weights that are on their backs. They started with a manageable load, and we slowly added weight from there as their bodies got stronger, as they adapted to that load. So it's not horrifying. We can lean over when we squat. Now the question is, do we actually want to lean over when we squat? And the answer there is, you probably won't be surprised, yes, it's a very productive thing to do, to point your chest at the floor when you squat for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're solving a geometry problem while you're squatting. You've got joints, you've got segments that you've got to get out of the way. So you're gonna get your knees, your femurs out of the way. You're gonna reach back with your butt as you squat. This makes it easier to achieve depth while you're squatting. And of course, because you're reaching back with your hips while you're squatting, you also have to lean over. If you just reached back with your hips and didn't lean over, you would fall over backwards, which is generally a bad thing to do. So you're gonna lean over while you squat. So part of it is simply solving the geometry problem of squatting, making it easier to achieve depth. It turns out it's also a very productive thing to do from a strength perspective. We're not going to get too into the weeds on this, but when you squat, your knees are going to go a certain distance forward, technically forward and out since they're going to travel in the direction of your toes, but your knees are going to go a certain distance forward and your hips are going to go a certain distance backwards. Now, the further your knees go forward, the more load or the more moment your knees are responsible for. The further your hips go backwards, the more load or the more moment your hips are responsible for. Now, we want to take advantage of the abilities of both the knees and the hips. We want to productively stress both of them so that we get stronger. The hips are the larger joints surrounded by more muscle mass. So we're going to ask them to do their fair share of the work. We're going to take advantage of the hips as much as we can. So because of that, we're going to reach back quite a ways with our hips. And again, because we are reaching back with our hips, that counterbalancing movement, you have to lean over to permit that to happen. So it's a stronger position, that hips back, leaned over position at the bottom of your squat. It puts you in a very good position to drive your hips straight up out of the hole. And lastly, this is how your back gets strong. When you lean over, remember, part of the horrifying aspect here for the uninformed and the internet experts alike is that they are subconsciously confusing the idea of a straight back with a vertical back. We don't need a vertical back. We're going to have a vertical back at the beginning of the movement and again at the end of the movement, of course, but throughout the movement it's going to take on a host of angles as we get into that leaned over position. But the entire time, your job, the job of the lifter, the job of me, the job job of my mom and my dad, the job of anybody lifting is to maintain a straight, rigid back. And because that back gets leaned over, it is responsible for supporting that load. That's how the back gets stronger. It's a productive stress on the back. If we never stress our back, then we never get any stronger, and the older we get, the weaker we get. And that is the most horrifying thing about the entire situation. So we're going to get leaned over because our back can take that load, because we started at a very manageable amount. Maybe we started with the empty bar on day one, maybe we started without a bar on day one, or maybe we started with 135 pounds on day one. That's going to vary by the person. But the back, all the muscles surrounding your back, in your midsection, your abs, your spinal erectors, you clamp down on those muscles, and they are responsible for keeping the back straight. They turn your back into the equivalent of your femur. Your femur remains straight because it is one segment. Your back remains straight because you make it straight. And because you've taken on the job of keeping that back straight, keeping that back rigid while it's leaned over, your back has the opportunity to get stronger. So it turns out getting leaned over while you're squatting is not horrifying. It is very productive. And the most horrifying thing would be our parents, our grandparents not taking advantage of the opportunity to get stronger. As always, we hope this helps you get stronger and live better.